Hey everybody, Sean with Triangle of Truth here again, and I am back with my end of year favorite comics list. This could be somewhat of a lengthy video. I have like 4 honorable mentions that almost made it into my top 10, and then I do have an actual like top 10. Albeit it was really hard to narrow it down because I actually did quite a bit of reading this year, and it was nice. You know, it really expanded, a lot of the stuff that I read, the different genres in comics. So it's definitely been a fun year. So with that said, let's jump right into it. I'll do the honorable mentions first. The first one was probably the first trade that I read coming right into the new year. It's called Drone from Red 5 Comics. I actually did a review on that, which we'll leave a link down in the description if you want to check that out. Basically, it has to do with 3 friends that happened to hack a military satellite and stumbled upon this drone program and actually started controlling one of the drones due to the fact that the people that were actually using them were under attack, and they could see it because they were tapped into the feed. So to help them, they had backdoored in to view everything, so the people that had actually attacked the military didn't know they were there. So they were able to get the one drone and help save at least one of the scientists that was there on part of the team. And that one was one that kind of hit close because the guys were actually based here in Houston, which is also where Red 5 Comics is based at. So it's a local company to us here on the channel. And it's just, it's a comedy. It's a little bit of fun. It gets serious, all in the same thing, But it also shows, kind of where you think the future of modern warfare is going to go, is that eventually it's just going to be, piloted drones doing everything instead of people. But definitely, it's a story I encourage everyone to check it out. So definitely get with your local comic shop to check that one out. The next one I have is actually a webtoon comic that I stumbled upon called Who's of Death. And actually I did it back when I got webtoon, Jenna said I should check that out, so I did. And this is one of those, it's a very simple art style. It's a really cool story. It's kind of like, I don't know if you could say a post-apocalyptic, but you probably could. But it actually centers around the unicorns and other beasts, and basically zombies have taken over the world, that kind of thing. And you have the actual mythical beasts like the unicorns, Pegasus, you name it, just a bunch of other ones. It's but it's a fun story. It's very innocent, very, very cool. I want to say there's probably well over 70 or so chapters at this point of it. But definitely, if you have the Webtoons app, it's free, so you can definitely check it out and enjoy it. So highly encourage you to check that out, along with all the other comics. I mean, they've probably got hundreds or in the thousands of Webtoon comics. So definitely check that out. The next one is one called Parallel, and this one is written by Jason Douglas, and he had it published through SourcePoint Press. This was actually Jason's very first comic that he'd ever written, and in talking with him, which was actually pretty cool to get to talk to him directly, he was really excited to get this out there. He's a writer by trade anyway, just in a different, I think, industry, if I remember right. But, to get this out there, and the reason why I like this one is it's a story that really, like, even to this day, it makes me think. And I wonder if I actually, it's one of those, is it open to interpretation as to what you think happens? Or, is there a much deeper meaning into the story of it? The guy, it basically starts with a guy who gets shoved out in front of a bus on a city sidewalk, and he gets hit. But you kind of come back to question, is like, did he actually get pushed like he says he did? Or was he just trying to commit suicide? He was in a very toxic relationship with his wife, who had actually gotten him to quit being a musician when they started really getting serious. He was actually her assistant, and you just see her treat him like garbage. She doesn't even take his last name. she always says, "No, no, I'm Miss blah blah blah," and just you could see it, and it really wears thin on him. And the parallel of it is while he was out or and whatnot, he was experiencing another life where someone, a voice in his head, or someone from a parallel universe, was letting him live in their body and experiencing the success of being a big rock star, a successful musician, that kind of thing. All the things that he wanted, he's getting to experience. Like I said, where the question comes in is this actually a parallel universe, or is this just something that is all in his head, and you're seeing what he would really like, and he keeps wanting to hurt himself, so to speak, so that he can go to sleep and go back to that life and experience it instead of being awake. So definitely check that out, because it doesn't hurt to have something that really makes you think and go, every so often. So if you can, get with Source Point Press, buy it. It's great. Jason, I hope you come out with another issue if you do get a chance to, another one-shot or comic or series. I hope that you're able to get another one published, because I do look forward to seeing more work from you, brother. Alright, and then last of my honorable mentions is one called Fly. It's from, I believe, Zenescope. This kind of centers around a guy who has an ex-girlfriend that, when you take this particular drug, I guess they call it Fly, it basically gives you superpowers. Think kind of like Superman. You're almost indestructible, you're super strong, you can fly, all that kind of stuff. And it comes from a friend of his that he befriended back in high school. The kid was getting picked on, this and that, and then the two happened to befriend each other because the one guy defended him against bullies, and they got to hang out one night. Well, there's this other character that they show that basically was the original super dude, and you see him come in and destroy this guy's, the nerdy guy, his family. You see him kill his parents, the house is on fire, this and that, and it's all over this drug that apparently the kid's dad knew about, because the kid, when they first met, the first night they hung out, they took it, and that's how he experienced it. So that's how it leads to this guy's girlfriend. When they got together, he showed her the drug. She became addicted to it, to the point of, like you would see a crack addict, they don't know right from wrong. She's doing different things, and you see her killing people. You see her throw almost a car on top of him, or through the wall of his apartment building, and it gets crazy. But it actually all ends up leading around to this kid, or now this man, really just wanting to get revenge for his family's death. And they kind of leave everything open-ended. He does finally meet up with the guy, and he fights him, and it's pretty cool scene for about 2 or 3 pages, if I remember right. And so they go at it, but in the end, he says he has a cure for his friend's girlfriend, and he gives it to her, and it ends up just killing her. And they leave it open-ended completely from there, because they're just like, he tells him, hey, what are you going to do, blah, 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 he flies off. So that's part of the reason why I didn't make it quite into my top 10. It was really, really good, and then they kind of gave you that ending, you know what I mean? And so, I was a little disappointed in that, but other than that, it was a really, really great read, great art, really cool colors, this and that, just everything you would expect from a Zenescope comic. So, alright, now we are going to move right on into the top 10. I will say it genuinely was kind of hard with all the reading I did to figure out 10. I just gave myself 10. I didn't want to do 5 because I felt that was way too constricting. So I was like, let me do 10, see what I can come up with. And it actually, there were some that breezed, right off, because they were just some that you've probably heard me talk about a lot throughout the year. And then the other ones, everything was so close together, I just really had to think what stuck out in my head the most. So here they are in no particular order, except for maybe the very last one. Number 10 is Animosity from Aftershock. And this was one that we've also done a review. Actually, Jenna did a review here on the channel. Another link down in the description for that so that you can hear what she has to say about it. This was one that I started reading, and I'm about 10 issues in now. I want to say there's like 28 issues in total, not including the side stories. Just the main story is about 28 or so issues. And basically, the quick synopsis of it is animals on Earth one day just woke up. They were self-aware. They had human brains. They could talk like humans. And they basically got back at humans. They attacked them for, all the stuff that they've done and this and that. Except for this girl and her dog. The dog is so loyal to her. And they're the main two characters that the entire series revolves around. And I'll say this, with the dog especially, if you read it, I'd be curious to know if in your head, if you hear voices like I do when you really get into a story, the dog to me is Sam Elliott, voice-wise. Like if they were to actually make this into like some kind of animated series, that's who I think should voice the dog. So just totally random off the cuff comment, but let me know in the comments, if that's something that, if you've read the series, do you hear something like that in your head? But basically it follows them around because her parents ended up, if I remember, they got killed. So it's literally just her and this dog trying to go cross country to find her brother. Along the way, it's just them meeting up with a bunch of either different humans that are just not cool. They come into one village where the humans are basically kind of servants to the animals, and they have a hierarchy and just stuff like that. You see, animal militias. Oh, and it's a big, engrossing story. And I don't even think 10 issues in, as good as it is, I think I'm like tip of the iceberg as to really where the meat of the story is going to come in. But this is one of those where it was early on in my introduction to Aftershock. Wasn't the first thing I read from them. Actually, years ago, I read one called, it's out of my head. If I remember it, I'll put a link somewhere down here. But I'd read Aftershock a few years ago, but that was the only thing. So really, I could say I got a reintroduction into Aftershock this year, and you'll find that I've got a couple of their stories on this list. So got a little sidetracked there. Next one is one that was really happy to read. It's a video game story that I've been a fan of for, 14 or 15 years at this point. And that was Gears of War: Rise of Rom. And for those of us who remember the original trilogy, especially the first game, Rom was the general of the Locust Army. And what this story is it covers the before E-Day. You actually get to see the Civil War that was drawn out in like the later 2 and 3 games with the Lammet. What it's focused on at first is Rom is not quite the general yet. It's another one above him, and as big as Rom is, this guy's like this big to him in the comics. That's about the best analogy I can think of. But it follows how Rom thinks that they're going to lose this war with the Lammet because of leadership, and he tries to convince Queen Mira of other things and kind of tries to underhand play his way into getting the general role. And what he tries to do is convince her that E-Day, which is what started the human versus Locust War, is the best thing to do. They needed to take the fight up to the surface and take over the surface. And that's kind of where you follow, you see, and it's a little interesting to hear the Locust talk, and they give you human English and whatnot, but there are a few other words that they use that are actually Locust. It's very cool. And it's one of those, it's another, I like a villain story. That's basically what Rom is. And so if you're a fan of Gears, it's a really great prequel to the games that I highly recommend everybody reads. So moving along, number 8 on this list is another Zenescope story called Satan's Hollow. So for me this year, horror comics were a big thing that I expanded into, horror and gore stuff. This was definitely one of those stories that was like that. And it's, a brief bit of it is it's a girl that was, her family lived in this small town when she was a child, and this cult basically murdered the entire family. But she was somehow left alive. And so she had moved away, this and that. Well, her and her husband end up moving back to this town, into the same house. And as soon as she shows up, all of a sudden the cult killings had kind of started up again out of nowhere. And it just was weird. You find out where that all ties in, and it's a very dark, very cool story. And it's got a nice twist at the end where who you think is the one behind everything is actually not, and it's somebody else altogether that's actually there, someone in the background throughout the whole thing. They're a side character, and all of a sudden you realize they're the ones that literally had helped or were helping to take care of everything. So if you're a big horror fan, especially if Zenescope, who does this stuff, I mean, about as good or better than anyone, check that out. My next one on this list is another villain story, and this was one where you've probably heard all of us here on the channel say that we're big fans of Valiant Entertainment and the comics that they put out. Well, they did an entire trade, and it was the life and death of Toyorata, who is basically one of their biggest bads in their entire universe. Which is one of the cool things about Valiant in general is the entire universe is actually tied together in some way, shape, or form. They do it, and they do it all over in these big events. And this was a story again where I did a review here on the channel, and you basically get to see how much of a genius Toyorata really is. You also get to see a few things and realize he is one of the most powerful psiots, basically like telepathy, stuff like that, on the planet. Peter is actually the other one that is really kind of his rival, but Toyo's genius is what makes him as dangerous as he is. You get to see him, manipulate the entire world government and just play them for a fool. That's basically what they do over the 6 issues that encompass the entire trade. And the other thing too is that maybe what a lot of people don't realize is when you see Toyo with the way they draw him, he looks like, a middle-aged, Japanese man. He actually was a child in like World War II, and the whole book starts out with he learns kind of really who he is when he lived in Hiroshima, and they show the bombing, and it literally just bombed right on his house, and because of his powers, he survives. And you see how he learns to use his powers to manipulate powerful world leaders throughout his way into power, and as he's gotten older. And it's just amazing. But the twist at the whole end of it is you really think he died. And then you get to see what he actually did, and it's ingenious. I mean, just basically transferred his consciousness into a computer and onto another person. So it's like he almost reincarnated himself and left all of his brains into a computer at the same time. I realize that's a big spoiler, but that's the best. I couldn't just leave it at this plot twist and not tell you without making much sense. So spoilers, sorry if you haven't read that, but even still, you need to read the whole thing just to see how it all comes about and really appreciate the genius in the writing that the team behind that comic did. Awkward transition into the next one. This was one. It's actually, I read the entire series in one night, but Jay is actually the biggest Comics Tribe fan that I know, period, end of story. And especially, obviously, here on the channel between the 3 of us. He has had Red 10 Volume 1 for years. Had read it, he'd been waiting very patiently. Finally, last year, Comics Tribe and Tyler James and them finally did Volume 2. And we got it, I think, in spring, if I remember right. He read it. He was just so excited to finally get to see the conclusion to this story. And so I wanted to talk to him, and do a video with him, so that was kind of something that we did. And so what I did was I just read both volumes in one night. And that was really the first big thing that I've read from Comic Tribe. And all I can say is that that story is one of the best murder mysteries, be it a comic, a regular book, TV, or whatnot, that I've personally ever had the pleasure of reading or watching. And that's what it is. It's literally, you try to figure out who kills Red. It's basically kind of like their version of Batman in that universe. And so it's 10 superheroes, and you try to figure out who's picking them all off. They start with Red, and then they literally just pick off the entire team. And it's one of those where, again, you think it's the big bad villain in that particular universe, which is Oxymoron, who is basically he's Joker turned up to 11. That's what Oxymoron is. You think it's him the whole time. And then, again, it's one of those where when the big reveal finally happens, you are just kind of like, oh my God, no. Just, I'm trying not to yell and scream on this, but that's literally basically what I was. I was actually on break at work and trying not to be very loud when that reveal came, so that people weren't looking at me like, what is this dude doing here, you know? So, yeah. And basically I was texting Jay, I was like, oh my God. And I was texting him while I'm reading it, like, I think it's so-and-so. And he goes, oh, you think so, huh? So it was really cool. So the banter back and forth between me and Jay. And then finally when we got to really talk about it, and then, yeah. So definitely check out that entire storyline, but also check out Comics Tribe in general. They may be like a smaller indie company, but the stories that they put out are absolutely some of the best. And the quality of the work, the quality of the art, the quality of the books that you get is actually better than some of the big name companies. Marvel, DC, I'm looking at you, because especially Marvel, you could take a page from them in the quality of their books for the most part. So, yeah, check out Red 10 Volume 1 and 2 from Comics Tribe, as well as their entire catalog. Sync could probably be the other one that we would highly recommend. So, I mentioned Marvel. I mentioned them in a bad light, but I'm going to mention them in a good light, because they actually made this list as well. I checked out the original Marvel Zombie storyline, Book 1, and while Marvel, to me, in the last few years has really not written very much good stuff at all, their older catalog is absolutely some of the best writing in all of comics. Marvel Zombies, obviously being one of them. You got Robert Kirkman, who is well known for doing zombie stories, obviously because he did The Walking Dead. The man is just a genius and knows how to take these kinds of universes and tell a grand story. I'm sure most people have actually read it. You're probably wondering what took me so long to read it. Sorry, there's just so much good stuff. So much good new stuff especially. It's hard to kind of get back to some of the older stuff. But that's one where I don't need to do a whole lot of explanation. It's a well-known story. I can't wait to finish the rest of the original storyline and then move on into the Resurrection storyline that's going on right now. I did get to read issue 1 of that, and that left me on a cliffhanger, so I am ready, very ready to get all caught up and then through this current storyline. My next one is, this is a sentimental comic for me, because for anybody who's followed the channel, I've said probably since day one, my favorite superhero is Daredevil. Well, I kind of been getting just tired of reading superhero stories this year, and even Daredevil, as much as I love him, I was getting a little with some of the more recent stories, and so I went away from it. Obviously, I did the horror comics, just the other genres in general. Well, I circled back around because for Christmas a couple of years ago, Jay had got me Daredevil, the Man Without Fear, which is the Kevin Smith storyline that he did with Joe Quesada. And having gone away from superhero comics and then coming back into this, I had a much more open perspective to storylines in general, not just for all of superheroes, but just in general. So it really made me appreciate this book and the story that it had to tell with Daredevil. And I finally get to see the characters that I know from the show with Karen Page. You get to see Foggy, you know, I believe his mother's in this one, just everybody in general. So it was a very cool story. It was cool to see what it was. You actually really thought that he was kind of cursed throughout this whole thing, and then to see that it was actually just a ruse from one of Marvel's well-known villains that are in kind of his universe and Spider-Man's universe, since they cross over quite a bit. So I was glad to get to read that and then really appreciate it in an entirely different light than if I hadn't taken a break from superhero comics. I think I might have read that book and been a little on it. Whereas coming back, I really appreciated it, and it ended up being my favorite Daredevil story ever that I've read. And I've still got a couple others yet to read. Alright, so these last few that I have here are definitely my top ones of the entire year. I'm going to start out with the book that brought me into horror comics in general. It was kind of my reintroduction into Aftershock, and that is Pestilence. That was the book. I sat there one night with them and with Jay and Jenna, and I said, I need something different to read. I'm bored of the superhero stories, I'm just kind of getting bored of comics in general. I need something new. And Jenna pulls out this really badass hardcover omnibus, basically is the best way to put it, of Pestilence. She goes, here, check this out. It's a horror comic, but I think you'll really like it. Lo and behold, that just opened Pandora's box for me into a whole new genre of stuff. And I basically read the entire thing in one night, probably within about an hour, blown away. I even laughed a little at this comic, and it's a very dark story. It's basically talking about how the Black Plague was not really just a plague that happened to humanity. It was something that the devil was trying to do to take over the world, and by killing most of the humans. And it gets a little bit religious, which is cool. It's got that nice element to it, but the language that they use in it is exactly what you figure knights and people around that time, how they really would talk. And so there were moments for me that at least were very humorous as well. But overall, it was a very dark, amazing, gory, fun book to read. So if you've not checked out Pestilence, get down to your comic book shop and read it now. It'll be instantly one of your favorites. Alright, so next one. This was my introduction to reading a Scotty Young book. I'd been kind of a fan of Scotty's artwork beforehand, but I never actually read anything that he wrote. And I will say this. Scotty is underrated as a writer. He is an absolute genius. This book shows that, and then I've got another book of his that he wrote as well called Middle West. But I'm actually talking about I Hate Fairyland. This story, this is 4 volumes of the most fun that you will ever have reading a comic. I'm not going to lie. The way he decided to use the language to make an 11-year-old girl sound like an adult, but without using cuss words. Like fluff this, muff that, just stuff like that, and it was great. But you get into this book very early on, and one of the big selling points that I could tell you to like to get in the book, very early on within like the first few pages, Gertrude, who's the main character, blows the moon up in this little fantasy land that she's in Fairyland. I mean, if that is not something that makes you want to read the whole story, I can't think of what else might do it for you. But it's literally just a big old machine gun and rocket launcher in a flying ship. She shoots and blows up the moon. And from then on, it is an epic fun ride that ends, and he does a very good job of putting a nice ending on it with a bow with her as an adult and this and that. But Scotty's artwork, of course, in this universe was amazing. It fits the way he does his art. And yeah, I mean, just bright colors, fun, you know, Fairyland, candy, you know, angry girl, this and that. It covers a lot of ground in the 4 volumes. So definitely it would be number one. I could probably say it could almost be tied for number one on my favorite reads. And then this next one, the terrible transition again, but nah. But if it wasn't for this series, I Hate Fairyland would be by far and away number one. But you've heard me harp on this for months now. I know I sound like a broken record, but something is killing the children. It's the favorite thing I've read the entire year. It's still ongoing, so I get it into 2021. I don't know how long the story's going to go for, but you know, as long as it can stay as good as it has through the first, I believe it's 13 issues, I'm there. I mean, this is my favorite horror comic. I love the story. I love the artwork. Love the characters. It's an all-arounder for me that every time I get a new issue, I'm excited. The other thing I like about it too is it's not one of those books where it's once a month I get a release. I want to say I get a new release at least every other week. So, and I usually pick up my comics on an every other week basis. So I get a new issue every time I go into the store. So I enjoy it for that as well. I don't have to wait very long to figure out what happens in the next issue. I'm normally a read 1 or 2 issues and then get a trade kind of guy. This is the first story where I actually would like to try and go back and collect the entire run individually. And that be the one series at least that I do that with. Just so I can get some of the cool variant covers and things like that. So that is literally my entire top 10 list for this year. Let me know in the comments what are some of your favorites. Are any of yours on my particular list? If not, give me, let me know, because maybe it's something that I didn't get a chance to read yet, but because you guys come in and say, "Oh, it's so good, you need to check it out," I have no problems going down to the comic shop or looking online, and I'll give at least one issue of anything a try. With that said, I hope everybody has had a great holiday season. I hope that your new year brings more than what this year has offered to a lot of everybody with COVID and everything. It's just been a trying year for everybody worldwide. So I hope everybody stays safe, stays healthy, and I'll catch you guys next time. Later, everyone. Bye.